So excited to talk with you about improving writing and especially those indicators C4.1 and 5.1 in our ELA standards. My name is Mandy Hawker, and I am the Elementary Education Associate for the ELA standards, and I'm excited to talk with you today. Um, I would like to introduce two of my colleagues who are here today, who are the backup dancers and the co pilots today. We have Casey Prince Harvey here, and she is our ELA support person, particularly for secondary right now. And she also supports all of our standards processes. Then we also have Brenna McCormick here, and she is our middle level ELA standards associate. Any questions that you have or needs that you have, these two are going to be in the chat for you today. I'm here to get all of your resources and anything that you might need. As we are going through this housekeeping slide, I want you to introduce yourself. Um, so here's what I'd like to hear. I want to hear who you are, where you serve, and then, if you or someone that you support or take care of is or dressing up this week for Halloween or Red Ribbon Week, let me know what how you're celebrating. So drop that in the chat for us. Excited to get to hear from you and connect a little bit across our state. Additionally, Casey Prince Harvey is going to be dropping a link to our landing page. Now, you received the landing page when you received your confirmation email on Monday, so you should have that link. But Casey's going to drop it again and pin it in the chat at the very top so you can have it. This will be the place for you to access any hyperlinks or resources that we mentioned throughout our time together today. And Caroline, I'll be eating that candy too. I tell you, last night at Trunk or Treat, I squirreled away a bag of Reese's pumpkins, and that's going to be my treat tomorrow night. Additionally, other than our landing page, we also will be using breakout rooms today. Now, I know when I attend PD, sometimes I see breakout rooms and I think, oh my gosh, I totally understand that sentiment, but I hope that you will see the value in our breakout rooms today. There's just going to be one opportunity for that where we're going to accomplish a task together. And I always think what value this time has for our state to collaborate from all the way up in Oconee and Pickens, all the way down to Jasper, and all the way back up to Horry County and across. It's such a unique opportunity we have here in these webinars to connect. So we will be utilizing breakout rooms. Additionally, we will be sharing some strategies and some insights today into improving writing instruction. And as we do those, we want to keep in the forefront of our mind our high quality instructional materials. Anything that we recommend, suggest, or offer to you for instructional support today is to be used in support of your high quality instructional materials. So just keep that in mind that these are to be used aside those materials that have been adopted. So we will get started. Now, we are so happy this past summer and fall that we have been able to offer recertification credit for these sessions. If you are here live with us and being an active participant, if you remain in attendance during the duration of the webinar, and then finally, if you complete that feedback form at the end of today's session, we will be able to send you a recertification credit certificate. Those typically come about a week after the completion of our webinars. So just look for that in about a week. It will be an individual email sent to you again in about a week. All right, all the business part's done. Let's get into the good stuff. Today's purpose, we have two actually. The first is to just enhance our understanding of the expectations for writing for the 2024 ELA standards, particularly in how we expect students to improve their writing. The second purpose for today, or focus, is to provide you some instruction strategies to support students' ability to improve their writing through the 4 ways our standards articulate: planning, feedback, revision, and editing. So, if this is our purpose, what's your why for joining us today? Go ahead and drop into the chat. Why are you here? Why did you want to come the day before Halloween and a busy time during your school year, especially for you elementary instructional coaches and teachers? Why did you want to be here today? Drop it in the chat for me. I am a big Swiftie. So when I go back and read that, I know I'm going to be thrilled. There was a little boy in a Kelsey uniform last night. Oh, Cindy, great. I'm glad you're here to learn today. Writing definitely needs more support. We see that statewide. Ugh, I love seeing your responses. So, one common theme I'm seeing through your responses is that we understand um, the three modes of writing, right? We understand narrative, informational, and argumentative. But do we understand the two standards and indicators that support improving our writing? And what does that look like? Now, see, 4.1, that's that grammar and conventions. We understand that, right? But do we understand the four facets of improving writing? And do we teach that? And how do we teach that? So I'm excited to dig in with you guys. I see that a lot of you are here for the right reasons and here to learn. So let's get started. All right. Now, I want us to consider this quote. Now, this is from Judith Hochman. I recently attended a webinar with her, and this is something that she shared, but I've also seen it in a blog post, which is in the speaker notes if you're interested in the entire post. But take a minute and read this Judith Hochman quote. Reviewing and thinking about your purpose for being here and your why for showing up today. How does this quote relate? What I'd like for you to do is grab a scratch piece of paper somewhere near you or in the journal where you're keeping your notes for PD. And I want you to respond to this quick write. I think quick writes are a lost art. I remember using those, I remember doing a lot of those when I was in professional development, but I don't remember having that experience recently. So I want us to do a quick write. And here's what I want you to respond to. What is revision? What is editing? And what do they look like in your instruction or the instruction that you most often observe or support? We're going to take 3 minutes and I want you just to write. We'll use this writing throughout our presentation today. So make sure you take the opportunity to engage in this quick write. 3 minutes. For those of you just joining us, we're doing a quick write, responding to the prompt on the slide. What is revision? What is editing? And what do they look like in your instruction or in the instruction that you support? We have 1 more minute. Okay, at this point, I'm not going to ask you to share what you've written, but I do want you to make sure you have something written down. Throughout our presentation today, we're going to be working to improve our quick write, so it's essential that we have something written to work with as we move throughout our presentation. All right. Now I'd love to do something called the fist to five. Now, a fist to five is when you give a corresponding uh, number to how you feel about a certain prompt or concept. So a one is, I don't understand that at all. A two would be, I need to go over this again. A three would be that I understand it pretty well. A four would be that I've got it. And a five would be that you could be the expert and explain it to someone else. And those can be represented with the numbers 1 through 5 in the chat. Here are the 3 prompts I want you to respond to. Here's our first one. I can identify opportunities where I've provided writing experiences of varying lengths and depths to support student learning. I can adapt writing experiences to intentionally incorporate writing skills for improving writing. Respond to that with the fist to five in the chat.
All right, I'm seeing some mixes of 3s and 4s, 3 to 4 somewhere within that range. So a lot of people
Y'all, I
will
had
say
to
they've
join
got
late.
it.
Please forgive me. I'm sure everybody's in a breakout room. This is Dawn. I had a
Hey,
meeting with
Dawn.
my letters case
Oh,
manager and it went 10 minutes over. Y'all just stick me in a group and I'll catch myself up.
oh, we're not in a group right now, but thank you. We'll make sure to get you settled as soon as we move into breakouts. All right, so I'm seeing 3s, 4s. Let's talk about our second statement. I thoroughly understand the expectations for both grammar and conventions. So that's C4, and improving writing, which is C5 for my grade levels. So if you haven't dropped that one in the chat, okay, I'm seeing. Oh, there we go. Sorry, y'all. I've been muted. So I'm seeing some 2s, 3s, 4s for this statement regarding C4 and C5. And we'll dig into that a little bit later with what those expectations are specifically for each of those, so that hopefully wherever you're at, if you are calling yourself a 2, we can hopefully move you to a 3. If you're a 3, we can move you to a 4. Last statement, I have a variety of instructional strategies to pull from when asking students to demonstrate and or practice their learning around revision, editing, and grammar. So I want you to think on this. Think about the strategies that you or the teachers that you support have um, for applying that understanding of C4 and C5. And I'm seeing, again, a mix of 2s, 3s, good many 3s, so understand pretty well 4s. I'll say from a teacher's perspective, this was the area where I always felt like I needed to grow because I might understand the expectation, But in terms of the strategies and having a variety of strategies, instead of leaning back on the same things over and over again, that was where I always wanted to maybe freshen my or develop my skills. All
Thank you,
right.
Casey.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay. So I saw a lot more confidence, like you said, Casey, in understanding the indicators and what the indicator expects of students, but a little less confidence that maybe we were having a variety of instructional strategies. And I think that's where we need to spend the majority of our time today, plugging in and digging into those instructional strategies. But that being said, we all need the same background knowledge and base. And so that goes the same for the teachers that you support. So let's take a look at our agenda for today. We're going to start with that overview of improving writing, and then we're going to dig into exploring the expectations for improving that writing. We're going to look at those instructional practices and how we can collaborate with those, and then have clarity and closure. That being said, let's dig in. As a reminder, we all know this, but do all the teachers that we support know this? There are 4 new strands with the 2024 ELA standards. Today, we're focusing on those written and oral communications. Out of the 9 standards in written and oral communications, 5 deal specifically with writing K through 12. The first 3 are those 3 modes of writing that are very familiar to us. They're common, and we addressed those in previous webinars. But the last 2 address grammar and conventions and improving writing. We're going to focus on those 2 today. So we're going to start with C5.1. This is the overall standard for that Communication 5 improving writing. This is also the end of learning expectation for our students. We know our standard is that end of learning expectation. So when it says to revise writing, what exactly does that mean? Let's review the glossary definitions of revision so that we can make sure that we align ourselves to that intent in the indicator. Here's the definition of revision. In the chat, drop for me what words or phrases draw your attention most. Ooh, I love that. Yes, Sarah, reworking. I see a lot of you wrote that. It's for clarity and for style, Mary Beth. Thank you. Reconsidering. Enhance, Melissa. I agree. Those words definitely draw my attention to the definition of revision. Okay. Now let's take a look at the standard for C4. This is for, it says demonstrate a command of standard English grammar and conventions when writing. Well, let's look at the definition. Okay. The rules of composition used to make writing more clear and comprehensible. Some examples include mechanics, such as spelling, punctuation, capitalization, as well as grammatical and language features, such as word order, subject verb agreement, and verb tense. This may be what we're more familiar with, but what words or phrases draw your attention? Drop those in the chat. The mechanics, yes. Ooh, a command of the language. So what I find so interesting is that both of these 2 standards are working towards clarity. Very good. Very good. Okay, so now that we've calibrated those definitions from the glossary, as well as the overall standard expectations for C4 and C5, which definitions do you feel best align with each standard? So here are the definitions for revision, and here's the definition for editing. Which is C4.1 and which is C5.1? So think again about C4.1. Which definition goes with that? And which definition goes with C5.1? Who can answer? You can unmute and tell me, or answer in the chat. Awesome. Yes, we have a clear understanding. This is something really important for you to clarify with the teachers that you support as coaches or as specialists in your school, that C4 really deals with that editing, and C5 supports the revision and knowing the difference between the two. So often they're lumped in together, but they're very different processes. So it's important for us to have that same base knowledge. So now here's a thought-provoking question. How do grammar and conventions, that C4, support and clarify the expectations for C5? This is something we're going to dig into when we look at the indicator, but C4 is used in service of C5, and we're going to see that clearly when we look at the indicator. So, just like I said, we are going to revise that quick write. Now that we all have calibrated our base knowledge around C4 and C5, I want you to complete a revision strategy with your quick write. Read back over what you wrote in that quick write time when we defined our own definitions of revision and editing and how we see that in the classroom. Using the radar process, you're going to pick one of these radar aspects and focus your revisions on that. So here's what radar is. Radar is when you revise with an intention or purpose. The first R stands for replace. Is there anything that you need to replace in your writing that has better clarity, specificity, or something that you overused in your initial writing? Is there anything that you can add? Is there information that we've explored in the past 10 minutes that you could add to the quick write that you initially wrote? Are there more descriptions you could add? Are there some standard codes that you could add? Is there anything that you need to delete? Was there repetition, or was it misfocus that you need to delete some information you wrote initially? And then finally, reorder. Is there anything that you need to reorder or restructure in the flow of your quick write? I'm going to give you an opportunity, about 3 minutes, to revise your quick write using this radar strategy. Okay, hopefully you've had a chance to revise your quick write. Now, a peek behind the curtain, we use the radar strategy in classrooms with students. This is something that we have practiced before in elementary levels where we don't present the entire radar strategy, but just one aspect where we say, hey, let's see where we can add more information. So just one way of showing you how we might do this same instructional strategy with our students. Additionally, for some of our upper elementary or even middle or high school level students, you may give them the entire radar strategy and have them make the determination of how they would like to implement a revision strategy to their own individual writing based on what the writing needs. So, just a quick pulse. Were you able to find a way to revise your quick write using this radar strategy? Drop me a yes or no in the chat. So, because we're all proficient writers, there may not have been a place where you felt like you could enhance or revise your writing, but hopefully you found at least one way where you could replace something, add, delete, or reorder the writing. Good. Thank you, Caroline. You added. I appreciate that. Additionally, I do hope you understand we went through that section pretty quickly at a very fast clip because, according to your formative assessment feedback, you felt pretty confident in understanding the expectations of what revision and editing are. Now, we're going to move into part 2 of our agenda of exploring the expectations. And we're going to take this just a little bit slower to make sure that we understand all of those expectations of the grade level indicators. So, as we dig in, we are going to take a look at the vertical articulation for C 5.1. Now, if you have been in any sessions with us, you know that the vertical articulation or the vertical progression is something that we use quite often. This is found in Appendix B of your ELA standards document, and it's a K through English 4 progression for each standard and indicator. Now, the document you're receiving right now is just C 5.1. We just want to look at that specific standard and indicators. Go ahead and grab that from the chat or your landing page. And here is the intention I want you to look at. First, what do you notice about the expectations for improving writing? Specifically, take a look at the change from 5th grade, you upper elementary support specialists and teachers, to 6th grade. What shift in language do you see? And what does that shift imply for us? Go ahead and take a look about that and respond in the chat. What expectations do you see for improving writing? And then what shift do we see from 5th to 6th? Okay, there we go. I heard clarity of content repeated several times in the chat. But what do we see? Oh, Angela Welch, I think you said it. Feedback is what we notice added in 6th grade. We're going to take a really close look at that. Where does feedback, where is it born from, and how can we support that at the elementary level? Very good. Okay, Aaron Baker. I wondered if you saw that, Aaron. You know these standards pretty well, right? Okay, let's take a look at the crosswalk. So we always want to look back at how are we instructing improving writing in 2015, and then how has that shifted in the 2024 ELA standards. So look at what shifts, particularly in kindergarten. What do you notice that's the same? With guidance and support so that we did not take that expectation away in kindergarten. That's still the same expectation that in kindergarten, you are walking them through improving writing with that guidance and support. But now let's take a look at the expectation in the first through fifth grade. So if you'll notice on the 2024 side, the first through fifth indicator I've lumped together because they do not shift or change. But then look at the 2015 side. One thing that I think is important for us to notice is that there were 3 indicators that supported improving writing in each of the 3 modes in 2015. That has been pulled out to its own standalone standard and indicator for 2024. The writing committee felt that that was an intentional move because of the importance of teaching the process of improving writing and that it's applicable to all writing that's produced in the classroom. Okay, now let's take a look at just the vertical progression from kindergarten through first through fifth grade. So again, first through fifth grade is in the same box there because the indicator does not change. But in kindergarten, because of the amount of new content that you're introducing to students, all of those expectations are expected with guidance and support. So with guidance and support, help students plan their writing. With guidance and support, help students revise. With guidance and support, help students edit. And then with guidance and support, help students build on their personal ideas and the ideas of others to strengthen writing. Now let's focus in for just a second on that language. Building on personal ideas and the ideas of others to strengthen writing. What does that mean and what does that look like? When we take a look at the kindergarten expectation that says build on the personal ideas of others and the ideas or personal ideas and the ideas of others to strengthen writing, and the English 4 indicator that says considering feedback from adults and peers, we see that building on personal ideas and the ideas of others relates to considering feedback from adults and peers. So if we don't intentionally in kindergarten begin to support students in using the ideas of themselves and others to strengthen their writing, what does that then imply for students in sixth grade through English 4 when they are required to use feedback to strengthen and improve their writing? What are we doing for students if we don't teach them to strengthen their writing by building on their personal ideas and the ideas of others? Angela, I like your suggestion in the chat. Peer conferences is a great way to build on ideas and the ideas of others to strengthen writing. I know when I was in the classroom, one thing that I struggled with was this building in time for students to strengthen their writing with talking to others or talking to themselves about that aspect of feedback. But we are building the foundation for feedback in the elementary level. It's essential for us to give students that time and that instruction to work with others to improve their writing and to strengthen it and offer those opportunities. Dawn, I would love for you to share those. That would be awesome. Thank you. And Lauren Hunt, you're exactly right. The foundation will be lacking when students are expected to use feedback to strengthen their writing in sixth grade if we don't build the foundation for that beginning in kindergarten and modeling that for our students. Now, that's not something I was very familiar with in the classroom, not something that I practiced well. So when we get to these instructional strategies, I hope you'll see that these are easy ways to implement that in your classroom in ways that I wish I would have known about when I was teaching. Okay, so now let's take a look. We've talked a lot about that improving writing. That's C5.1. Now let's take a look at C4.1 that deals with grammar and conventions. Now, this is where we have a ton of sub-indicators at every grade level that articulate what those grammar and conventions expectations are for those grade levels. We can see through this use of sub-indicators that what is outlined specifically for those individual skills and contents. So let's take a look at what what that might look like if we deconstructed those indicators. So again, because of the amount of information within those C4.1 indicators for grammar and conventions, we're going to take some time and we're going to deconstruct those. And then we're going to provide an opportunity to look at what instructional next steps you might want to take in order to support those indicators. So what we're going to look at now is we're going to see a second grade example. Now, if you've been with us in any of our presentations, you've seen this deconstructing indicators graphic organizer. The first thing we do is we have the indicator up at the top in its full form. Then underneath, we have the skills and the content broken down. So let's take a look at the skills pulled out from C 4.1 for second grade. That's a ton of skills that we are expecting in that one indicator. This is a heavily loaded indicator that really benefits from being deconstructed. We also can notice when looking at these skills that there are varying levels of difficulty or cognitive complexity. Identify may be a little more simple than actually using the skill in the student writing. Writing is definitely a more cognitively complex skill than just identifying. But now let's look at the content within these indicators. Take a look at the content for that second grade indicator. Now, we know that in South Carolina, the background knowledge and educational awareness of some of our teachers has changed, right? We have teachers coming from various backgrounds and various skill sets to support our classrooms. So when we think about that and we consider that information, look at that content section. Is there any information in that content section which may be an area where the teachers that you support need refresher information? I know for me, there's several items that I would want to make sure that I feel confident in before I go instructing any of these sub indicators to students. There may be areas where you want to dig in with teachers and say, hey, what over here in this list feels familiar? What feels unfamiliar? And how can I support you in getting clarification on any of these topics? This is especially essential when you get into the third, fourth, and fifth grade indicators, which are a little more complex grammar and conventions expectations. It may be information that's just not as common to those teachers and may need a little more support in order to feel ready to enter that instruction with your students. So breaking down these skills and content is an essential part of understanding C 4.1 for all elementary grades. Okay. Additionally, when we're looking at C 4.1, one statement jumps out to me at every grade level. It says, when writing. We're going to talk about this in section 3 as well, but when writing has a pretty big implication for us as educators. Oftentimes I know in my education, the grammar and conventions expectations for me were taught in isolation. When I see that statement, when writing, that indicates to me that yes, there might have to be explicit instruction in isolation for me to learn some of these grammar and conventions expectations. It should also be expected that those expectations are supported in the writing taking place in the classroom. So when I'm doing a writing produced piece, the expectations for grammar and convention should be there as well. All right. Now we're going to get to do a little bit of work, get you busy and get you moving around some. We are going to be placed in breakout rooms, and you'll be given about 10 minutes to take one of the indicators for C4.1, and you're going to break it down with those skills and content. Each slide will include a grade level indicator for C4.1, kindergarten through 5th grade. Okay. And I'll tell you how you'll know which one you're working with in just a minute. But you will pull out the skills and content for that specific indicator. Now, you may have to add extra rows to the table. So whoever is our tech savvy friend, you be in charge of doing that on the slide deck. But one person will access the slide deck in each breakout room, and you will be in charge of articulating the deconstructing for your group. Okay. So again, here's how you'll know what slide you're going to access. Casey is going to drop into the chat the slide deck that we're going to work. It's called Deconstructing Indicators Elementary. And up at the top of each slide, there is a gray box that tells the grade level and the group number. So you will either be kindergarten through 5th grade, and you'll either be group 1 or group 2. And that is what slide you'll access to deconstruct your indicator. Here's how you'll know which slide deck to access and work on. When you go to your breakout room, you'll see in the top left corner a grayed out, very difficult to see, doesn't make it very intuitive, right? Very difficult to see title that says the grade level and the group number. This one says English 1, Group 1. Yours will say kindergarten, Group 2, 1st grade, Group 1. But you'll look right up there, and that's how you'll know which slide on the slide deck to access. Now, if this is confusing or you're like, I'm not sure what to do, when you get in your breakout rooms, Casey and I will be hopping around all through them to make sure you are able to identify your grade level and group and find your slide. So don't fear if you're like, I don't even know what she said to do. I don't know how she said to access this. Casey and I will be around to help you. No worries. So you'll have about 10 minutes, like I said, to deconstruct that indicator, identify the skills in the indicator and the content, and go ahead and jot those out. There's also boxes at the bottom of your slide that look for insights or considerations. So if you finish early with deconstructing those skills and those content, you can also start to fill out the insights and considerations box. The insights are just like, what patterns do you see? What new learning or wonderings do you notice? And then the considerations would be, what instructional implications does this mean for the audience you support? Do you have a lot of first-year teachers who may need help understanding some of the content, or do you need to talk through the considerations of what it means to teach this explicitly, but also in student writing? So furious. First, I want to say thank you for engaging in this activity. And I've been reviewing your work on the Deconstructing Indicators slide deck that you produced. What I noticed is that you so intentionally broke down the skills and content for these indicators. It is so clear to see the work that you did. And also, some of you were able to fill out those instructional implications for us, which I feel is so valuable. Cindy, I love that you're asking for a blank template for this. Absolutely. I will put one on the landing page, but then I'll also share it back out when I send the recording. So you'll definitely get that. And I'm glad that you asked that question, Cindy, because my next question to you all is, you're all experts in the standards, right? You all have been studying these. You've been with us in these webinars for months now, and you have been really digging into these standards and indicators. So this process for you of deconstructing indicators may be something that's familiar. It may be something that you feel like you have expertise with. But do you feel that deconstructing indicators in this way is something that you could share with the audience that you support. Here's what I want you to do and respond in the chat. How could this deconstructing indicators activity support you in your role? Do you see a way to use this activity with the people that you support? Unmute if you feel comfortable or drop it in the chat for me. How could you use this? Angela, I love that. Yes. Don't you feel like this could be like a ready-made PLC? Take it straight to your grade level PLCs, Jessica. Hopefully, yes, that's what we want you to do. Take this and use it, redo it. Grade level planning documents. Absolutely. And it's a low risk way to assess your teacher's knowledge of these indicators. And then it gives you those ready-made learning targets. Well, what does my learning target need to be for C4.1? Well, I need to teach capitalizing the names of people and dates. There's my learning target. Absolutely. I hope that you feel like this is a process worth replicating with the audiences that you support. Again, we know that you are experts in these indicators. You know this content and this information, but is this a way for you to help the teachers you support or any of the audience that you support access these indicators for instruction? Oh, Kim, I love that you have teachers who are eager to do this. Yes. So, and Cindy, I love that. That is the perfect clientele to support with this deconstructing indicators. Those that have those international or young teachers that we can help um, build that knowledge of what the indicators say. But I was going to say one request that we often get is teachers are hungry to deconstruct indicators. They need help sorting them out and talking with them through with experts. And so, if you can facilitate these discussions for the people that you support, I think that that's something that they really want to do, something they want to understand. All right. So now that we have engaged in our breakout rooms, I want to draw your attention to one support document that we have on our instructional resources page that supports the understanding of C 4.1. The Grammar and Conventions Matrix is a tool to use alongside C 4.1 that just provides another view of the grammar expectations for each grade level. So Casey has dropped this in the chat for you. What we'd like for you to do is take a minute and review the information in the matrix. As you look through it, you'll notice that the skills mentioned in the matrix align perfectly to C 4.1. This isn't new information or different information. It's just the matrix format of C 4.1. Maybe an easier way to read it if you're looking at that comprehensive expectation for grammar and conventions. This matrix shows where skills are introduced, but not where learning stops. So if a skill is introduced in fourth grade, does that mean that that's the last time we teach it? No, that means that those fifth grade teachers and beyond are responsible for ensuring that that skill is still an expectation at that grade level. And then finally, it allows for intentional instruction and support. So again, I want you to take just a few minutes and then in the chat, tell me what you notice about the Grammar and Conventions Matrix. I love to see some of your takeaways. It gives that good outline, you're exactly right, of how skills progress. I also like that it's within different categories. So sometimes it's difficult for me to read like a C4.1 expectation like indicator for first grade and see, well, like, so this is where capitalization does this, but when does it do all the other things? Right? So I want to make sure that as a first grade teacher, I'm assessing and expecting the right capitalization expectations. I can look here and see, oh, in first grade, I'm only expecting students to capitalize names of people, dates, the pronoun I, and the beginning of sentences because those were kindergarten expectations. Everything else is a to be completed expectation for capitalization. So seeing it in those categories helps for me. Linda, I agree. You can see the progression in a small space. Awesome, awesome. So again, we just want to reiterate that the grammar conventions matrix is the exact same information as C4.1. It's just in that matrix format. It's important for us to remember. All right. Now let's take a second to think about any gaps or shifts in content expectations. So when we have gaps or shifts in content expectations from 2015 to 24, or just with our population of teachers that we're supporting, those can cause teachers to question how to provide support to our students for improving writing, especially to ensure the mastery of those complex concepts. So knowing that that is the end goal does not negate the fact that students may need explicit instruction in grammar and conventions concepts. But it also means that they need intentional focus in the instructional choices that they're given. There has to be a balance of both. So let's take a look at this chart here. Before you read it, I want you to understand how this is divided up. So we have explicit instruction in column 2, and then writing experiences in column 3. Compare explicit instruction to writing experiences as you read the chart. So what we would like to see in all classrooms in South Carolina with improving writing instruction is that we have that explicit instruction where the concepts are taught explicitly from my mouth to your ears. But we also want to see a balance of writing experiences where students are able to demonstrate the skills that they learned through explicit instruction. We're going to talk about how we can support those in instruction. Now, one other aspect of those writing experiences that we give to our students is that they have to be two different kinds of writing experiences. We want them to have generative writing experiences where students are applying the learning through creating a product or creating a piece of writing. Those are like when they write a summary paragraph or when they do essays, projects, creative pieces. Those are generated by the student. Now, we also want to give students writing experiences that are evaluative in nature. Those are where students can serve as the expert in reviewing work produced by their peers or work produced by maybe mentor writers, and they are providing like some kind of targeted feedback, some revision suggestion, or some kind of edit to the writer. Examples of these kind of writing experiences would be like when you do a self-evaluation of a piece you've produced. Maybe you give feedback to an author on something they've written, or engaging with those mentor texts and talking about why writers chose to do the things they did in writing. So again, we want to have a balance in our instruction of explicit instruction and writing experiences. We have to have both in our classrooms. But then from that, we also want to ensure that those writing experiences can be generative, where students generate the writing, but then evaluative, where students are evaluating the work of someone else or themselves. Now, let's stop right here and let's go back to that radar strategy. We're going to take our quick write one more time, but this time I want you to complete the radar strategy for A with your quick write. Based on the information that we've just explored in section 2, explaining those indicator expectations, what can you add to your quick write? Is there anything that we've explored or done that you can add to that quick write? I'm going to give you just about 2 minutes to add information or descriptions to your quick write.
All right, hopefully you had a minute to revise the paragraph you've been working on, that quick write. I'd love to know in the chat, or you can unmute, maybe one way that you were able to replace, add, delete, or reorder based on the learning that we've done so far.
I really appreciate the support you guys have given throughout this workshop. Really love that chart you showed before we did the editing on how kids need both. They need the direct, explicit instruction aligned to the indicator, especially those that are new on skills to that particular grade level. And then they also have to have multiple repeated experiences with low risk, high risk, authentic practice tests throughout the school year so that the explicit instruction supports the writing. And then I really love how y'all intentionally built in our opportunities to go through that. Y'all did a good job mirroring your direct explicit instruction of what we need to know as teachers of writing, followed by opportunities for us to work on our own drafts. Really well done there. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Dawn. You're always so kind. And yes, we do hope that you're seeing that the way this was planned is allowing for you to practice exactly what we hope our students would do. And I love these specific examples that are coming in the chat, where there was a new resource introduced, so we added that. Thank you, Linda. Using the skills from the Grammar and Conventions Matrix, added more specific information like standard rules of English and grammar, changed words for clarity and voice. Love that. So thank you all for continuing to work on that draft as we move forward. And Marcy, I'll get you a copy of that slide in the chat in just a moment.
All right, that's going to carry us into section 3. Now that we've had an opportunity to look at that overview of improving writing and really explore those grade level expectations for C4 and C5, we're going to jump into how we can apply that to our instruction and have an opportunity to dig into some resources. So as we move into this section, we always want to talk about that alignment of our instruction, and it really flows in the same way that we're looking at this session today. So everything goes back to those grade level indicators, understanding the intent of those indicators and kind of where each person fits within that puzzle, which then helps us to inform our planning and instruction, and ensuring that the instruction is aligned and supports the intent of those indicators, which then allows us to create formative assessments that truly help us to understand where our students are at and provide that feedback. This is a process. Really, the instruction and the formative assessment piece is iterative, right? We can always go back and after our formative assessment and adjust our instruction or revisit the indicators to ensure that everyone fully understands the intent. But everything really does start with our grade level indicators. And hopefully now we feel grounded in that work to be able to talk about instruction. So as we look back at improving writing, which is that C5 or C5.1, we think about that as really our umbrella for this session, and then those expectations for C4 really fitting within that or clarifying those expectations. And within this expectation for improving writing, we have 4 pots of information or 4 main aspects. We improve writing through planning, revising, editing, and we talked about building on personal ideas, which will develop into feedback, right? It's creating that culture of feedback so that students can give and receive feedback and consider feedback as a part of improving their writing. So we talked about 2 aspects of this pretty in depth already. So we've looked at revision and editing with our definitions from the glossary. And I want us to pause here and think when we look at these 2 definitions, when we look at these 2 processes as a part of improving writing, which one typically comes first? Which aspect of improving writing do we focus on first? Do we focus on the revision or do we focus on the editing? And I would love to see your responses in the chat and maybe why you think one comes before the other. Which one should come before the other? Or what is the impact of focusing on one before the other? Okay, so, I'm seeing some mixed responses, which is interesting. Kim, I think your response is really spot on that we tend to focus on editing first because it's simple, right? We know what's right, we know what's wrong, we know we can go in and fix that. We can give that proofreading, editing checklist, right? And we can go fix those periods or fix those comma splices. But we want to consider also how a focus on revision first can help to improve the content of the writing before we do that final polishing at the end. And yes, there is a lot of confusion, Amy, between these 2 processes. That's why we've taken a moment to make sure that these 2 definitions are really highlighted throughout this session. And that when we go back to that expectation for improving writing, that we see both are included. They are both important and essential components of improving writing, but they each do different things. And I want us to think about this through a quote from the Writer's Practice. And I want us to pause here and think about this. So from John Warner's The Writer's Practice, he says, "One of the great regrets of my life as a writing teacher is how much time I spent giving students feedback about all the things they were doing wrong in their writing. I did this because it was done to me as a student, and it took a number of years for me to realize, for the most part, those corrections and criticisms weren't particularly helpful when it came to learning how to write." And this is where we think about what we might call that red pen effect. So I want you to think back to your own experience as a student. Did you ever have a teacher who took a piece of your writing and went through it with the red pen and circled everything that was wrong, all the capitalization errors, the spelling errors, the comma splices, subject verb disagreement? Has anyone ever had that experience as a student? Because I know that I did. So my question is, if this is something that you've experienced, do you feel that that made you a better writer? Did it make you feel more confident in your writing? Okay. So I don't want to negate that as a process, or negate editing as a process, right? We know that that polishing is incredibly important, but I want us to also consider the importance of revising the content, right? And eventually moving towards doing that for our task, our purpose, and our audience, which is that end goal. Mistake ritual. All right. Didn't add confidence, but in some ways it helps you grow, right? It helps you grow in understanding those grammar and conventions expectations. But we want to consider that balance of both. Okay. All right. So we're going to go back to that previous slide that's going to show those 4 pots of information for improving writing. So in our improving writing standard, and Mandy, you can just move it ahead one slide. We're going to go back to those 4 main aspects of improving writing, right? So we've talked about revising, which is really focused on the content, the clarity, and really the big ideas. We've talked about the editing, which is that polishing, really focused on those grammar and conventions expectations. And then we also want to talk about those 2 pieces. And Cindy, I would give you snaps for that one about the writing rope. 40% of the time being spent on the planning, 40% on the revising, 20% on the editing. Yes, that is where we kind of want to think about that for today's purposes. So again, we're talking about planning, we're talking about revising, editing, and that building on the ideas of others, which or personal ideas or the ideas of others. So really thinking about creating that culture of feedback and reflection, right? I want you to keep those 4 aspects in mind, because on this next slide, I'm going to ask you to think about which of those areas is your I have and which of those areas is your I need. So I have would be the area that you feel is your greatest strength out of those 4 things. And then your I need is your area where you feel that you might need to further explore or further grow. And I'll give you my example and then I'll ask for your example. So my I would say probably was feedback. I taught high school, so at that point, they were working towards giving and receiving feedback from peers and adults. And that was a culture that I really built in my classroom. I had lots of opportunities for feedback. But the I need probably was editing, and not because I didn't know what editing was or didn't know the grammar expectations for my grade levels that I served, but because I wanted to find ways for students to have opportunities to edit intentionally that weren't just the checklist for, do you have periods? at the end of your sentences? Did you capitalize the first letter? You know what I mean? I wanted to have something more than that, and have more opportunity for students to edit in different ways and do that intentionally. So feedback would have been my I have, editing would have been my I need. So tell me in the chat, tell me what your I have or your I need is out of those four things listed in improving writing. Do you feel planning, revising, editing, feedback? Which one is your greatest strength? Which one is your area that you would like to further explore? So drop that in the chat. Okay. I see planning is an I have. Revising is an I have. Feedback is an area for need. Need feedback. Okay, a lot of people mentioning feedback is their area that they might need to grow in. And you are in luck because we are going to explore some instructional examples or resources for each of these four areas. So as we do that, we always like to share that when students are writing, because we want to apply these skills in the writing, right? We want to improve the writing through those authentic experiences. We like to think of that in terms of micro, mini, and macro experiences. So not always at the end of the essay necessarily, but that we provide lots of experiences. So micro experiences are those experiences that are less than one class period, mini experiences being 1 to 2 class periods, and then macros being those more culminating products, which may be that end of unit essay, or it may be the paragraph at the end, so, or infographics, those creative pieces, really something that is the culminating experience that would be longer than or more in depth than a 1 to 2 class period experience. This is also where you can dive in more specifically on those skills that you want to develop with your students and really focus in on those sub-indicators. So all of that is to say, we have some examples for you. We have some instructional resources that I'll drop in the chat for you. What you're going to get is a folder, and within that folder, you are going to have a folder for each of those four aspects. So there's going to be a planning folder, a feedback folder, a revision folder, and an editing folder, which you can zero in and focus just on that area where you feel like you needed to grow. Because within that folder, there are going to be resources and some examples, some strategies that you can explore. So if that's your I need, like if feedback was your I need, maybe you go to the feedback folder and see what's in there that you might explore to support your planning and instruction. If you're thinking of your I have, then maybe you want to look at some of those micro, mini, and macro experiences, which are at the bottom of that folder. So at the very end, you're going to see a micro, mini, macro document just for elementary. And it's going to give you micro, mini, and macro writing experiences for elementary for those modes of writing. So you've got some writing experiences that you could explore and think about your I have and consider, how could I take something that I know that I'm already good at, that I know I've got a good practice for, and maybe embed it into a new writing experience? So either way, whether you explore your I have or your I need, you will walk away with something new. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to take, do we want to take maybe 10 minutes? 10 minutes is good. We'll take about 10 minutes so that you can do an independent exploration of this folder of resources and focus either on your I have. So looking at the micros, minis, macros, think about what you could add to that that's based on your strength, or your I need, where you go into one of those folders and explore some of those strategies or resources. We will ask when you come back. Which will be about 10:40. When you come back, we'll ask that you debrief and share some of your takeaways in the chat or through unmuting, okay? Are there any questions before you move? I think we'll go ahead and start debriefing. I think looks like a lot of people have had a chance to dive in. Remember, these resources are here for you. You can always go back to them. Yes, share them with your PLCs. So don't worry if you feel like you still want to look a little bit more, you have time. You can always go back to these. But I do want us to go ahead and debrief a little bit. And I think we're going to debrief through a virtual turn and talk. So Mandy, if you don't mind skipping us to the next slide or moving us ahead to the next slide. All right, so what we're going to do for our virtual turn and talk is you've got a prompt here at the bottom of the screen. It says, how can you use the selected resource, so whatever you looked at, in your planning and instruction? So the first step is to respond to that prompt. So drop your response in the chat. And then step 2 is after you've done that, go back into the chat, look at the responses, and either react or reply to someone else's post. So it's not necessarily a face-to-face turn and talk, but it is a virtual turn and talk. Okay. So share in the chat how you can use your selected resource for your planning and instruction, or the planning and instruction of teachers you support if you're in a coaching or specialist role. And then once you've responded, go back up and pick one other response to reply or react to. I'll give y'all just a couple minutes for that. While y'all are doing that, I'll give my answer. I went into that editing folder and I found an article that was called Best Practices for Teaching Grammar, which I thought was particularly interesting. And I really like those 2 points at the end about not marking every error, and then expecting bumps in the road, that we know that as students learn new concepts and we're asking them to apply them in their writing, we know it's not going to be perfect right off the bat, right? So having a little bit of that flexibility and having some conversations with students and giving those opportunities for those rewrites or opportunities for growth help to solidify those concepts and build confidence. All right, I'm just taking a look through some of the responses. Oh, I love that. Yes, the trading card mini lesson can be used as you're working on your informative expository writing, you're planning for that, using the COPS poster for capitalization and punctuation. Specific to the standards. And yes, you can totally go back and look at those sub indicators for the particular grade level, or look back at the grammar and conventions matrix and merge those two together. Let's see. Okay, using some of the different graphic organizers that are included, the hook writing resource. And the radar strategy, yes, we had the radar strategy included in the folder, and we actually used it multiple times today. So you already have some practical application, as well as the resource that you can go back to and share. And a lot of these will have a blank graphic organizer or template that you can copy and use directly with students or to share with teachers. I see the mention of the micro, mini, macro document. If you support K-12, we actually have a master document that has every grade level and every mode of writing. So K through English 4. If that is something that you are interested in, we can always add that to the landing page or share with you. Especially, again, if you, oh, and yep, Brandon dropped it in the chat. So you're welcome to go to that if you're supporting across multiple grade bands, or if you're looking for ways to maybe adapt some of those strategies to meet the needs of your learners. Yes. And yes, feel free to please share with PLCs, share this folder as a resource for teachers, anything that we can do to support our educators. All right, I think we've had enough time for our virtual turn and talk, and I'm going to hand it back over to Mandy for clarity and closure.
Thank you, Casey. Okay, that gets us to part 4, where we are going to do a little clarity and closure to end our time together today. We always like to save time for that last clarity and closure because we feel like it ties all of our learning up in a little bitty bow at the end of a presentation. And elementary journalists, I know y'all enjoy that. So we're going to close with our 4C reflection today. And our 4C reflection is in the 4 areas of conversation. Who will you have a conversation with about today's learning? Connection. What connection can you make between today's work and learning and your work that you do to support students in South Carolina? Commitment. Is there one thing that you'll commit to try or do based on today's learning? And then change. What do you feel could change as a result of today's learning? So, if you will, in the chat, I want you to drop one response to one of the 4 C's. What conversation will you have? What connection can you make? What commitment do you agree to? Or what change do you see the work today having? So, go ahead and respond in the chat. I want to see those answers populating. We are always so thankful to have a webinar with so many attendees. There's 100 of you here from all across the state, but this work is only as good as the work you do with it for students in South Carolina. So seeing you make these 4C reflections for commitments to next steps, conversations with others, connections to actual instruction that supports our students in South Carolina, or ways this information has changed your understanding or can change the understanding of people in your circle, that is where the work really matters. So we're so thankful to have you here as our hands and feet all over South Carolina to support those students with their understanding of improving writing. So this is where we get excited, seeing that the information we've talked through today actually has hands and feet and is going to impact students, because that's what we're all here for. So that brings us to a little personal reflection. We're going to revisit that fist to 5. Remember, 1 is I don't understand this at all, and 5 is that I could explain this to someone. Now, seeing a lot of you say, hey, I'm going to have a conversation with my teachers or coaches about this, I think we have a lot of 5s in this room. So let's go over those 3 expectations. The first, and I see answers already populating. Yes, I can identify opportunities where I've provided writing experiences. Awesome. Yes, you see ways to intentionally incorporate skills for improving writing in instruction. Number 2, I thoroughly understand the expectations for C4 and C5. Oh, awesome, awesome. Yes. Doing that deconstructing of C4 really helps us to feel confident in understanding expectations. I love seeing those responses. All right, and then that last question, I have a variety of instructional strategies that I feel like I can use to support revision, editing, feedback, and planning. Good. Yes. Hopefully that folder informs the instruction of the teachers that you support. But also just know that that's the starting line, right? You have the ability to add to that and build from that with the instructional materials that you have and the experts you have in your building. You as an expert, but also the teachers you support being the experts. So I am so excited that you found today helpful and impactful for the classrooms that you support. That brings us to our feedback slide. If you will please access the feedback form, Casey's going to drop that link in the chat. This feedback form just gives us feedback on our presentation and how we see that it is actionable, but also relevant to the needs of our state. So if you will please just give us some feedback. Let us know if you found this session actionable for next steps, but also relevant to what the people in your buildings need. Ginger, we appreciate you. It's always good time to spend time with you. Again, my name is Mandy Hawker. You'll be asked that in the present or in the feedback form. Today's session you can just call Improving Writing. And this is session 4 of our fall webinar series. We have 2 more fall webinars coming. One is in 2 weeks, and then one is all the way in December. If you are interested in attending those, the November 13th session is this same session, but especially for middle school and middle grades 6 through 8. And then in December, we have a session on oral communications for English 1 through 4. So if you are interested in those, the registration form for that has also been added to the chat. We'd love to have you join us there. This is your last elementary webinar for the semester. So whew, we're happy about that. But if you just can't get enough of us, there is 2 more opportunities to engage with us in the coming weeks and months. On November 21st, we have our ELA Fall Office Hour for November. At that office hour, we will be talking about the expectations for theme and central idea for our elementary grades. So please join us for that. Casey's going to also drop the registration for that November office hour if you want to attend. We've already got one on the calendars for January, where we'll also be having an office hour coming up. So we always love when you can engage with us and be with us if you're interested. Now, those office hours are afternoon hours. So if there's any teachers or people in your building who maybe can't attend during the day but do want to meet with us and learn, we would love to have them in our office hours time. And those are from 3 to 4. That's a great question. Kim Hart just asked in the chat about if the office hours are recorded. And unfortunately, we are not recording the office hours just because of the nature of them being a little more or a little less formal and a little more conversational. However, many of the questions that are submitted for the office hours question and answer time are answered in our ELA bulletin monthly. So you'll notice the bulletin coming out for November is going to include several of the answers that are addressed in that November or from the October office hours. So we still want to give you access to some of those questions and answers that you were hearing, but maybe the recording, we're just not recording those sessions. All right. If you filled out the feedback form, remember that's how we issue your recertification credit. We thank you so much for joining us today and giving us 2 hours of your time. We hope that you have a great Wednesday. If you have any questions, though, we will listen and linger for about the next 11, 12 minutes. If you need anything from us, again, my name is Mandy Hawker, and I appreciate being with you today. And Casey and Brenna, I'll let y'all sign off as well. Sanchia, I